Welcome to the Cosmopolitics What the Hell Hot Takes Happy Hour. I'm Elise Labott of Cosmopolitics. I'm here with my one of my ride or die closest friends, Dany Pletka of What the Hell. And we thought this would be a nice way to, you know, take the edge off a week of, roller coaster of news. It's our first one. We're going to try it every week and see how you like it. And Dany is my resident mixtress. I always go to her for the best cocktails. So let us know what we have on store.
All right. So, first of all, Elise, thank you. Second of all, Elise, my followers didn't get an email because I am one of my followers and I didn't get an email. So, we're
Well,
going to
you
have to
might be
work out
getting it any second. We're going to have to work this out because
tech stuff.
any anybody that is not a what the hell subscriber has to be one immediately because Dany is a kick ass and just has like smart and funny writer. So
Same to you, my friend. And I'm pouring my drink right
cheers.
now. I put the
And tell us
recipe
what
up
this
on.
is.
I put the recipe up on notes in Substack. This is a gimlet. This is
This
something I
isn't just
made.
any this isn't just any gimlet.
This isn't just any gimlet. This is a hot takes happy hour gimlet, and and what I did was I made simple syrup earlier today with cucumbers, sugar, water, lime juice, and lime zest. Then I tossed in some mint. Yay! Let that steep for a while. Threw it in the fridge, and then put an ounce and a half. I may have stuck a little extra in because I like it a little sweeter into my cocktail shaker with 2 ounces of Hendrick's gin, another half an ounce of plain lime juice, and it came out. Wait, let me try it because I want to hear what you have too. In fact, I want to laugh out loud at what you have. Cheers, everybody! Thank you for joining
Cheers.
us.
Thanks for joining us on this inaugural Hot Takes Happy Hour. What do you think?
Oh my god, it's so good. Oh my god, next time you're here, we'll definitely have this
See,
without
when
hot
I
takes.
see this is called the Hot Takes Gimlet, but usually when I go to Dany's house, we just call it a Dany. She's like, "Would you like a Dany?" Today, I'm at the Rohnert Park, California Bureau of Cosmopolitics, visiting my mom. So all I could find was this Kettle One Cosmopolitan bottle, and
Love that.
I tried to cross it out and write Cosmopolitics, but it didn't work. All right, let's get to some. We said like this week deserves a happy hour, but I feel like we're talking about that every week.
Yeah, every
Um,
week is on a happy hour. Yeah,
yeah,
look, let's not be let's try not to be too obvious while being hot takey. What I wrote this week, and I think it's really true, is you can talk about all the details. You can talk about all the things that you and I talk about when we're offline. Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, U.S. foreign policy, NATO,
right.
everything. But I think that the tariff issue is not just the elephant in the room. It's like the meteor that hit the earth,
Right.
and you cannot not see everything through the prism of that decision making. What did you think?
Well, look, we knew that when President Trump came in, tariffs were his thing. You said it's my favorite word. And it was a question of, look, there is, reasonable person would say, listen, we have a lot of trade imbalances. We want to reduce the deficit. We need to return the manufacturing base to the US, blah, blah, blah. All true. Okay. You and I have talked about this a lot. A lot of Trump's ideas, have a gem of, something, kind of a lot of people are talking about, and they're not divorced from reality. But we always say, and we'll get into, you wrote this amazing piece about does President Trump have a plan? The execution is always, as I say, ass backwards. And so tariffs coming on, the way it was rolled out, the way it was implemented, we're not sure, are tariffs really to reduce the deficit? Are they to reduce the trade imbalance? Are they punitive? If he doesn't like your policy, we're going to slap tariffs on you. It seems to be like, he uses it for whatever he wants. And I think this uncertainty, obviously, we've been talking about all week, um, is really what the problem has been with, the markets. Anybody that's having a drink check already, probably because they already checked their 401k or their pension or whatever.
That would
And
require 3 drinks.
that would require three drinks. And is it on? Is it off? It was the whole thing with the allies too. Is it on? Is it off? Is it this? Is it that? Nobody really knows. And I think, now he reduced, this whiplash, kind of press pause, I think even Republicans, and you would know better, said, dude, what the hell are you doing? Like, let's have a little bit more order to this. And he seems to be, I don't know if he's backing down, but he seems to be kind of, hitting the brakes a little bit.
So look, again, I think what you said at the outset is right. We can talk legitimately about trade imbalances. You can value them, you cannot value them. Personally, I think they're a little bit stupid. We're always going to have trade imbalances because we're richer than everybody else and we buy stuff.
Exactly. We buy
And
stuff.
right,
We
and
buy stuff.
we buy stuff. Okay, so that I think is an argument, but look, there are all sorts of non-tariff barriers that Donald Trump has rightly identified as barriers to free trade, whether they're, you don't wash your chickens right, which is, by the way, the argument that the Europeans make about importing American chickens. I think the
Do we
challenge,
wash our chickens right though?
we wash our chickens a lot harder than they wash their chickens in chemicals and bleach, and they don't like bleached chicken, whereas I'm
Yeah.
okay with bleached chicken. You didn't know until I
I
told
don't know
you.
what we did without it.
Exactly. But I think the point here is, look, first of all, we don't really know what Donald Trump is trying to achieve. And because we don't know what he's trying to achieve, this is what you laid out at the beginning. Is he trying to rebalance trade markets? Is he trying to punish China? Is he trying to lower the deficit? Is he trying to fundamentally remake the global trading environment? He hasn't really said clearly what he wants. If what he's trying to do is restore manufacturing to the United States, that's not going to happen because we have, and this is the thing that is totally mysterious to me. We have inputs. If you make a widget, Joe Sixpack may be a Trump voter and he may be an amazing guy and he may really, really want to make widgets. But where do we buy the widget making equipment from? How much does he cost per hour? Do we import parts of that widget making equipment from overseas? And if you answer that honestly, there is almost nothing here that is made 100% in the United States. So, to the guy who very nicely said to me, no, this is going to be amazing because, you fancy people in your Mercedes and your BMWs, but American car manufacturers and American car buyers are going to benefit from this. And the answer is they're not because their inputs come from overseas and they are under punitive tariffs. So, again, the logic isn't there, the plan isn't evident, and the capriciousness on, off
Right.
is truly destabilizing, bad for investment, bad for hiring, right? And bad for international relations. I feel like we've dealt with that. Now I can have another sip.
Okay, go. I also want to know, okay, so we're talking about manufacturing jobs, but how does this affect, like, okay, let's say in an ideal world, people were going to buy American, um, with his immigration policy and wanting to get rid of all these immigrants. Are we, asking for people to, are people going to fill those jobs?
I think that's a little bit unfair. Look, I
I
think
mean, I'm
Donald
just
Trump
asking the question. I don't know the answer.
I think Donald Trump is very very solid on illegal immigration, and I think 80% of Americans are with him on this. There are fringes in California, Massachusetts, New York, who
We can
aren't.
talk about the prisons in El Salvador, but maybe that's another
Yeah.
happy hour.
Yeah, no, and we should talk about due process, but we need a happy 2 hours. But because you and I agree about the due process issue, Donald Trump has said repeatedly that he wants more legal immigration, that he thinks that people who go to college in America should be offered the chance at a green card. It's like if they support Hamas, maybe not. But so there's again, it's not so much that people disagree with what Donald Trump says at the top of the hour. The problem is just the execution on all of this, whether it's the deportations you're talking about. I mean, I'm delighted that illegal immigration at the border has trickled to almost nothing because I think that's correct. People should stand in line and they should come here legally. I did, and all of our families at some point did. But it's the execution. It's the execution on the trade stuff. It's the execution on the immigration. It's the execution on Doge. There's a lot, and the foreign policy stuff that troubles us. I mean, we were talking about this Iran negotiation. What the hell?
And I mean, I think that, obviously, and, we're talking with our friend Stephen Cook. I always say, don't let an N get in between us because I can't call him Stephen Cook for some reason. I always call him Steve. But um, I think people that follow Iran were shocked but not surprised because he kept saying he wanted to have a deal, he wanted to talk, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden just blurts out, oh, yeah, we're talking on Saturday. And, even some of
Did
my
BB
greatest
know?
sources,
Did BB
I,
know?
I don't think they knew about the date. I don't think they knew about Amman, but they knew it was coming. And I think that even though ostensibly he came to talk about tariffs, Prime Minister Netanyahu really came to make sure that they didn't throw Iran under the bus when it came to these talks. Of course, he kind of did throw under Israel, and throw Israel. He kind of did throw Israel under the bus today or yesterday when he said, "Oh yeah, if there's military, Israel will be, really involved in that." Um, but a little bit, again, was it planned? Who's going to be doing it? Steve Witkoff, who's, his real estate agent slash national security advisor, knows, I would bet that he knows, as much about Iran as you could fit on this head of a pin or a pen or whatever.
Yeah.
So, who's going to do the talks? What is the goal? And, and now look, the Iranians are getting hip. You know that, they may be horrible terrorists, but they're very good negotiators. And they already are speaking Trump's language. The president said today in a speech, we're not after a nuclear weapon. We have no opposition to investment by American investors. American investors come and invest.
That's what the president of Iran said. Let me just say that it will be a cold day in hell when I'm on the Iranian stock exchange. The Iranian rial is at the lowest it has ever been in
So
history.
stocks are cheap.
The time is now. Buy
The
low,
time is
sell
now.
high. Look, I hate personal politics. And I'm as much of a hater as anybody in Washington, but I don't really like going after people personally. But at the same time, even if Steve Witkoff was a guy who was very experienced in negotiations, understood Iran, understood Russia, understood Ukraine, understood the Palestinians, understood Israel, and understood diplomacy, it would still be a really hard job to manage the ceasefire negotiations between the United States and Russia, United States and Ukraine, which is what he has been charged with. Also manage the Gaza ceasefire negotiations between the Hamas, the Egyptians, the Qataris, the Israelis, which is also his job. And now to be the point man on an Iran deal. Does he know anything about nuclear proliferation? Is he bringing nuclear
Well, this
proliferation
is the question.
experts?
I mean, listen, obviously Trump trusts him, and, you know, some of the Gulf allies have said, he's a good interlocutor, but certainly you need a team of experts to kind of guide you on the nuts and bolts of all this. And I'm not sure that's there yet. I had a piece out today we were talking about that was actually inspired by you last year when you talked about this divide in the Republican Party. And now it's like, I think even more, you called it the neo GOP and the OG original gangsta GOP. Did you like how I said gangsta?
I know I did. You're
Um,
so authentic.
and I think that this whole episode with Mike Waltz really just showed it with Signal, and now everyone's got their knives out for him. This isn't about a personnel decision or someone doesn't like this one. This is about the party having two fundamentally different worldviews: a conservative, you know, not if not interventionist, internationalist, robust U.S. presence around the world, which a conservative presence, which you subscribe to, um, and then kind of the MAGA crowd that's more of a, I don't even know what they are. They're, to say they're protectionist, internationalist. I just don't know if there's a word. I'm honestly, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I just don't know where they sit. I think it's like more about, hey, charity begins at home.
Well, I
We
mean,
hate the globalists.
charity does begin at home, and that's fine. But what's really interesting about this, I thank you, by the way. I really, I loved your piece, and I love the fact that you're posting at the preamble as well. And the funny thing is, the piece that you're talking about that I wrote was on one of our favorite friends' Substacks as well, not on my own, but on the Liberal Patriot, which is just fantastic, and I
Yeah,
commend
they're
the two of
great.
you.
That's another
Uh,
good one.
it really terrific and thoughtful and balanced, and that's important. But I wrote that last year. I will say, if you want to talk about two GOPs, OG and Neo, the OG GOP is in eclipse. This is Donald Trump's party now. As much as there are people who may not want it to be. This is Donald Trump's party. What's weird, and I mean this genuinely weird about this, is that, and people who know me and who listen to our podcast called "What the Hell Is Going On" have heard Mark Thiessen, my co-host, and me discuss this. Um, the weirdest thing is that the Reagan Foundation does this terrific, terrific poll every summer, and then one other time in the year. And last year they divided up MAGA Republicans and just conservative GOP people, and the MAGA people were more supportive of Ukraine. The MAGA people were more supportive of U.S. global presence.
I don't understand that though.
Well, but I'll tell you why, because this isn't a priority for people, and absent strong leadership, they'll go along to get along, right? So absent strong leadership, you know, in the Obama administration, we pulled out of Iraq, even though the American people were actually okay with it. Ditto with a lot of the things that Donald Trump wants to do. He is pushing in another direction, and the push that is coming from the president is very meaningful, very important, very impactful. And the kind of the Lindsey Grahams and the, well, used to be Marco Rubio's and others who were Republican leading lights of a more traditional GOP are basically silent.
Let's just let a silent pause be there. But let's talk about Marco Rubio. When Trump nominated him, I thought, I think a lot of people thought this could be, is Trump going to be more a traditional foreign policy Republican? And I think the last few months, if anyone had any questions about that, the answer is no.
No, I agree with you. I mean, look, I think
But is
one
that the party driving him or him driving the party?
I don't think it's either. I think it is a fundamental reconstruction of the executive branch. What we have seen what we saw in the Obama administration, we saw it a bit in the Bush administration. We definitely saw it in the Obama administration, saw it in the first Trump administration, saw it very much in the last Biden administration, and now we are seeing its apotheosis is that the State Department doesn't matter. Secretary of State doesn't matter. Decisions are getting made in the West Wing. Decisions are getting made in the White House. They have a seat at the table. Somebody may call them at the end of a discussion and a decision just to let them know what happened. I've heard of a couple of instances
Courtesy
where
call?
where literally where the Rubio was called and told this is the way it's going to be and wasn't part of the decision making process, which to me would outrage me if I were Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State. Sorry, I think he's pretty upset about it, but this is the reality. There's been a massive centralization of power inside Washington. The executive branch, which has arrogated to him itself all of these sort of imperial powers in America, actually is even behaves that way even internal to its own branch, dismisses the legislative branch, dismisses the judicial branch, and they are the tyrants in their own system as well. Elise has a drink. That doesn't feel
That's a drink.
constitutional.
It doesn't. And I mean, I think there's another conversation to be had, about the Constitution and is are we headed towards a constitutional crisis? But let's go back to Iran for now. Talks on Saturday, led by Oman. I heard the Emiratis wanted to be part of the, mediating, but Iranians felt more comfortable with Oman, who has good relations with the Iranians and actually not bad relations with Israel. and good relations with the United States. So what could come out of this?
I mean, my God, I'm really, really worried about what could come out of this. Donald Trump pulled out of the JCPOA, the so-called Iran deal, after which was Obama's signature achievement, and Biden wanted to get back into it. He wasn't able to. You documented that beautifully. We've talked about this 1,000 times. Biden wasn't able to get back into it, and what happened was we just had no policy. We had no policy on Iran. Europe had no policy on Iran. We weren't enforcing sanctions, but we weren't trying to talk to them either. We were floating. But they were moving apace with their nuclear weapons program. So now we come in and they're that much closer, but they are also in dire straits. I mean, think about this. They've lost Hamas, they've lost Hezbollah, they've lost the
Right.
Houthis, and the guys in Iraq
And
said
their
they
own
lost,
defenses are weak. Qasem
and
Soleimani is
Assad is
dead.
gone.
Right, right.
So, I mean, they
And
are
now there's more of a kind of Shia Sunni Muslim in Syria
right, exactly. And so we have the Iranians,
by
by
the
the
throat.
throat. This is a moment when they can be told, as Netanyahu said, you could pull a Libya, get rid of all of it, be honest, open up, give it all to us for inspections. I worry that they're much smarter than their interlocutors. They were much smarter than their interlocutors from the Obama administration, crying Wendy Sherman and Ernie Muniz, who didn't know shit from Shinola.
Are
Um,
you against a deal?
yes, of course I'm against a deal.
Okay, totally. No deal.
No deal. What about you?
Deal or no deal? I think if it's the right deal, I think if, one of the things is they always focused on the nuclear program and as if, the other proxies, although, the other stuff, the proxies and stuff, clearly they're using this time to, what's
Harm.
the word?
Rearm.
Rearm, kind of a resurgence of all of those. I don't know why the name is escaping me. It must have been too many of these. But
It's your cheap
you know,
boost.
to
But okay, so what's the right? So
to
Rosalie
strength.
asks, what's the right deal? What's the right deal?
I think it's this is the deal that they won't take, but the deal that they had with Gaddafi to give up the nuclear weapons and ship them out. Now that would be a deal.
What about support for terrorism? Does that have to be part of it?
I think so.
Good. See,
I think
you're
so.
my
But then it's
negotiator.
this is the thing. There's a that would be a fundamentally different regime. Like the Obama administration, the Biden administration said, "Oh, we're against regime change." They were against regime change because any regime in Iran right now would never go for that kind of deal. I think we're generations away from the kind of Iranian regime that wants to be part of the West. I'm not saying it's never going to happen. That wants, international to have more of a, role in the region, more, better relations with its allies and with the world, even maybe with Israel. And it's really interesting. If you poll Iranians themselves, they're actually not unsupportive of Israel.
Right. Right.
So
David
yeah,
David says, right. David says the right deal is to give up the nukes and give up the violence. So, an interesting point. I was at a lunch yesterday with Fred Kagan,
let's
who
go.
runs AEI's Critical Threats Project. Just outstanding work on Ukraine, but also on
Yeah,
Iran.
he says great stuff.
Right. So Fred says something really interesting, which is we are about to see the first generational change in revolutionary Iran since the 1979 revolution. Iran has been governed by either the people who were involved in the revolution or veterans of the Iran Iraq War. Every single senior level person is either a cleric or a veteran of the Iran Iraq War. But those people are dying. Those people are
Mm.
aged. And so we are going to be moving to a new generation. What does that mean? Could that mean a different attitude? It's not going to mean a different attitude right now where the Iranians are super worried, but could that mean that there's a window of opportunity at some point? I don't think that's crazy, but personally speaking, as the owner of 18 F-35s and some bunker busting bombs right here in my basement next to my cocktail shaker,
Yeah, in,
I would
in
like to
McLean, Virginia.
I would like to hit them right now. That's what I would do.
I've got
That's
I've
what
got
the
one in the
Israelis
parking
would
lot.
do.
I've got one in the parking lot. What about this meeting between Netanyahu and Trump? I think He came to the White House under the guise of tariffs, but really was like worried about Iran. And it sounded like, Trump shut him down. He's like, we don't want a war. We don't want military action. You don't, as my brother would say. But then again, yesterday he said, well, maybe there will be military action that Israel will be involved.
Tariff? No tariff. Pause? No pause. Bomb Iran? No. Deal with Iran. I can't keep track. But my cocktail shaker is leaking. I need an insulated cocktail shaker, just as
Okay,
an
can
aside.
someone please send Dany
An insulated cocktail
at,
shaker.
at whatthehell.com?
Exactly. Look, bottom line on this. I think that meeting with Netanyahu went terribly. I don't always go along with the conventional wisdom about such things, but I think he came here with the idea that he could maneuver Donald Trump, and he couldn't. And Donald Trump said something that, to my mind, was really actually reasonable. He's like, "Well, we're not going to lift. We're not lifting the tariffs right now, but we give you $4 billion." And I thought, yeah, I don't think that Bibi, who really is you may like him, you may hate him, but an outstanding politician, right? I mean, he has dominated Israeli politics for decades now, and it is not because the others are
And that guy
completely
has 9 lives, man.
he does, but I think that he miscalculated. I think that meeting was a failure, not only on the tariff front, but also on the Iran surprise front. So I worry. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that was a good meeting, and I think there's only so many times when you can show up and go, "Hey, just dropping by."
I mean, yeah, an Oval Office meeting isn't just, well, I mean, anyone at these days, it seems, can get into the Oval Office. But seriously, meeting with the US president, I don't think he's going to be able to do it the way he used to. I mean, certainly Biden didn't let him in, all that soon. I thought it was a little long, but, I think he thought his relationship with Trump was going to be a lot more solid. But look, Trump is fickle, to say the least.
Yes, yes, indeed, yes, he is. And so, what else are we talking about now? We've covered Iran.
Russia.
Eh, God.
Huh?
So we just had the another exchange, another prisoner exchange. The Russians had arrested this, I guess, American ballerina, was it? And so we released somebody who we had in prison here in exchange for that. Now, I hate hostage taking. I hate rewarding hostage taking, but I really worry about this constant prisoner exchange. What does it say about the tenor of the relationship that we're just constantly doing these sleazy little deals with the Russians? Um, what do you think?
I think that they can't make deals on the big things. And I mean, look, yes, Trump kind of leaned into Putin's, on the deal with Zelensky and all this stuff. I mean, clearly he seems to be gravitating more towards Putin's point of view on Ukraine. But this is a way of showing, oh yeah, we can work together. The U.S. and Russia, we have good relations. We can pick up the phone. I mean, I don't think it's. I think it's less about Ukraine and maybe more in the effort of trying to reestablish the relationship, trust building measures. I just fear, as you do, that it could be, if they're going to make that kind of deal on, it's one thing to make it on a prisoner exchange. It's another thing to make it on, Ukraine, strategic stability, those kind of things that, are big ticket items.
Well, the only thing I would say about that is, we're sort of having our cake and eating it too. We're saying on the one hand, does Donald Trump have a plan? No, he appears not to, and yet he's sort of building up this foundation of a relationship with Putin, which
The
suggests he
problem
does
is
have a plan.
Putin, well, the problem is Putin has a plan.
Well,
Even if Donald Trump doesn't have a plan, Putin has.
I actually think Putin is wearing out his welcome. The problem for Putin is he does not want a ceasefire, right? He wants to end this war, take what he's got, and prepare to take all of the rest. And uh,
David,
sorry,
is it
somebody
a
just asked a
conscious?
funny question. I apologize. Look, and there's a fundamental contradiction here, which is Donald Trump wants a cessation of fighting, an end to the killing, and Putin wants to occupy all of Ukraine, get rid of Zelensky, kill who he needs to, and kill the Russians he needs to. And this is the fundamental disconnect. the thing we don't see, and I honestly don't know whether it's happening or not, is whether there's anybody holding Putin's feet to the fire. In other words, he's not answering Donald Trump.
Who
He's
who
not moving towards a
who would hold them?
ceasefire. Well, I mean, Mr. Busy Witkoff could hold their feet to the fire. I just,
But if Trump isn't, like, what does it matter?
well, that's exactly right. And then well, I guess it raises the question, does Putin feel pressured by what the Europeans are doing? They've just had a big Ukraine meeting. They are gearing up. They're spending more on defense. They are for the first time kind of really
That's
seriously
true.
and not just flippantly talking about, is that putting pressure on him? I actually don't think it is, because I don't think they're very I don't think he takes them seriously. But what do you think? I mean, it would be good if the Europeans were finally serious.
I mean, I think they're probably a long way from being in a position where they can be a credible threat that Russia would take seriously. But for the first time, and I've written this, and I think you have too, that, look, ironically, Donald Trump has done what previous presidents have been unable to do, which is to get Europe, to get its act together. One, if you wanted to be charitable, you could say that it's diplomacy. If you wanted to be more realistic, I would say it's this uncertainty, this instability, this, lack of predictability on where Donald Trump is going to go on Ukraine, and perhaps his cozy relationship with Putin. That is, you're hearing European leaders, basically saying that they don't think the U.S. is a reliable partner anymore. Not
Okay.
only, whoa, 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 I know what you're going to say. Yeah, just take a sip, take a sip. It's not only because of any one policy, and it may not only be because of Donald Trump. And look, I hate people. Hate is a strong word, but I really don't like when people say, "Oh well, don't take him literally, take him seriously." Like, he says a lot of shit, Dany. But it's about, the inconsistency with our and this dysfunction in our political situation. One president is coming in saying one thing, another president is coming in saying another thing, and this again, like the tariffs, like this whiplash, like, you know, leaders world leaders need to deal with their own national interests, and they want to have stability and predictability.
Okay.
Okay, go.
Yes, actually. So, first of
Could you
all,
say that again, please?
first of all, I'm going to give the rant I've already given today once,
Rant away, my friend.
which is, it is some freaking nerve for our Western European allies who have been disinvesting for 4 decades
Yes, I
in
just said that 2 minutes
NATO.
ago.
Yeah, but it is some nerve to say to us, we think you're not with us. What the hell were they doing? And did we say that to them? No, we didn't. Did we say that to them when the Germans tried to crowd out Ukraine by building Nord Stream 2? No. Did we say
No,
that to them when the German chancellor went off to be on the board of Gazprom, where he still is? No, we didn't. So the idea that suddenly we're telling them they need to stand up for themselves, they need to have more guns, less butter, and that they are now saying, we're just worried you're not with us. You haven't been with us for 40 years. Now you know what it feels like, Europe. So I can't stand that argument. I think credit to Donald Trump in his first term and now for getting them to take their responsibilities seriously. They are close to Russia. They depend on Russian oil. They depend on Russian energy. And so I think the behavior of our European allies has been entirely feckless for too long. If they're finding their feck, finally,
finding their feck. I swear to let's. Can that be a hashtag?
if they're finding their
No, it's a
feck,
good point.
finally,
It's a good point, and
that's
we
a
have
great
said
thing.
they are kind of talking about, their own. But I do kind of think the way, again, back to the execution issue, the way he's gone about it, is kind of ugly.
Yes, you're totally right. But I will say, everybody else is nicey nice. Obama, who brought this up
Has
in Wales,
and agreed,
but it
and
got
and
nowhere.
they haven't done anything. I
Right.
understand. I
So,
think.
another important thing pointed out by one of our viewers, totally agree. Another thing that is inadvertently, but that's even more delicious, pressuring the Russians is the fall in oil prices, right?
Mm,
As
good
we've
point.
had this economic instability and turmoil, the price of oil has now, it will never match match up the losses in my 401k, but that was fantastic. It will pressure Russia. Somebody else asked about what we think about the 6 Chinese that the Ukrainians arrested and found.
Oh yeah,
What do
I
you
wanted to
think?
talk about that. Yeah, that's. I mean, listen. First it was North Koreans. Now it's the Chinese. I mean, it does go to show you, even though the war is not over and the Russians still have the upper hand. There isn't it. It says it all. If you have Chinese people fighting for you in Ukraine, if you have these North Koreans fighting for you in Ukraine, it's interesting what gets into the media cycle, right? Like, and how no one really takes that as a signal that, oh, well, maybe Russia's not doing as well. But guys, North Koreans and Russia and Chinese are fighting in Ukraine for Russia. What does that tell you?
Well, listen, as Fred says, really totally accurately, the Russians have taken a territory, the area of about less than Rhode Island, at a cost of about a 500,000 dead and wounded. Of course, the Russians need everybody they can. I suspect these Chinese were not sent there by Xi Jinping. People, I want you 6 to go and fight for Vladimir. Just 6. I suspect they are either mercenaries or press ganged or something else. And my bet is
A
that
pilot program? It's a pilot program.
it's a pilot program. It's an internship. Uh, it's just a spring internship, small stipend, free lunch, possible immediate death. But, but
Your weight in pierogies.
that
That's
would
you
be
get paid your weight in pierogies.
okay. That would be a slightly twisted but mildly hilarious Monty Python skit. But let's just say that I am willing to bet there was a phone call from Beijing to the Kremlin saying, there better not be any more Chinese fighting with you because we didn't send them. And I don't know how you got them, but you're not getting any more. The North Koreans were different. They were sent there by Kim Jong Un,
Right.
but
Right.
not from Xi Jinping. I don't. There's just not a chance in hell that that happened, and our China analysts don't think so at all. I have one last thing I want to bring up with you because we should start to
I
wrap
have
up.
um
You bring up.
very quickly something to watch. Britain says it will support plans for a Nuremberg-style tribunal to prosecute Russian leaders. We don't have to talk about it now,
What
but
happened to the
something to keep.
International Criminal Court? I thought they believed so deeply that they wanted to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu because they believe so deeply in the ICC. Right, exactly, because the ICC doesn't work and is in fact a horribly corrupt institution. But that's another rant. Um, that would be very interesting.
Go.
I actually don't think threats of prosecution
I
like
don't
that
either. I don't either. I'm not
are
saying he
very
doesn't
helpful.
deserve to be in the Hague. I'm just saying that it probably isn't a good idea if you're trying to talk about
Totally.
negotiations to end the war.
I
What
would.
did you want to bring up?
So I wanted to bring up the last thing that I saw that I mentioned to you before we started, which is that the French have said that they're going to recognize a Palestinian state this summer. So Macron is hosting a, Middle East peace process because, you know, that's so fresh.
As
Middle
one
East,
does.
as as one does, a Middle East peace process event this summer with the Saudis. And when I think peace, I go to the Saudis, and apparently at that point are going to recognize a Palestinian state. Is now the time to do that?
Look, I don't know if there's, this is the thing. Couldn't you always say, is now the time to do that? And I think one of the reasons a
I'm
lot of
sorry, it's
countries,
now different than 10 years ago.
no. But what I'm
Really, October
saying is,
7th?
no, no, what I'm saying, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant that, like, there's never going to be a good time for a country. You're always going to say that it's a wrong time. I don't, I think one of the issues, two things. A, we can't, I understand that Israelis don't think right now is the right time for a Palestinian state. I get that. We can't give up hope that there ever will be one. And we could disagree ardently on that. But I think what's happening is nations are seeing the possibility slip away. You see that the Israelis are moving more towards no, we don't think there should ever be a Palestinian state. And even before October 7th, you saw countries more and more looking to try and recognize Palestinian state. The longer that there is absolutely no avenue for to realize Palestinian aspirations, um, I think you're going to see more and more countries. I agree now might not be the time, but there has to be a time. And so I think countries see it slipping away and now they're going, the problem is, okay, France, recognize a Palestinian state. What does that mean? It means like nada. It means absolutely nothing. A state is not a name only. A state has to be territory. It has to be governance. They don't have, obviously, there's absolutely no Palestinian governance. So I think like I want to see where do you think the administration is on trying to move forward with some kind of horizon for realizing some kind of Palestinian entity or state or whatever.
You are right. I don't agree with you. There is no uh, natural right to self-determination. If there were, the Kurds would have a state. The Kurds would have a country. The Kurds might have more than one
A little
country.
bit different.
And
Come on.
a little bit different. There are, they have been oppressed. They have been discriminated against. They have
I'm
been
not saying
murdered
that they aren't, but I'm
wherever they
saying,
are.
right.
No, but
Okay,
nobody gives a damn because they're
true.
Muslims, right? So
I
that's
no,
number
I
one.
don't think that's it. I don't think that.
Of course it is. Number two, because there aren't Jews killing them. The best thing that could ever happen is that the Israelis would come over and start killing them, and then everybody would want a Kurdistan state. The bottom line is a recognition of a Palestinian state now is nothing other than an affirmation of what Hamas did on October 7th. Hey,
I think that's a good point.
you got yourself back in the headlines by murdering thousands of Israelis and then wantonly
Well, it
continuing
does.
to
It rewards
destroy.
Hamas. We've talked about this before. It rewards Hamas for bad behavior.
Exactly. And so if you say an avenue, what you have to say is not there needs to be an avenue. What you have to say is that the Palestinians have to find a way to develop institutions and
I agree.
governance and an antipathy toward murdering babies. I think that's a low standard personally, an antipathy towards murdering babies as a matter of national policy before anybody will recognize them as a state. That should be the standard. And the problem is, and this is something where I'm going to sound like Elon Musk, except much poorer. This is where the international community, which has poured hundreds of billions of dollars into the West Bank and Gaza, and what do we have to show for it institutionally? You can't blame the
Nothing.
Jews for ruining everything, right? Education, jihad. Economy, it's a kleptocracy. Democracy, it's a dictatorship or a kleptocracy. Certainly, there are plenty of oligarchs. Rule of law, these people are terrorists. They stole
Not
everything that was
okay.
given.
They're not all terrorists. That's the only thing I'm saying. Like I think
I agree.
on
They're not
on
all
one hand
terrorists.
we want no, they're not. On one hand, we don't reward Hamas for bad behavior. On the other hand, I do have issue with like for the rest of their lives punishing Palestinians for a decision to elect Hamas in 2006.
What about October 7th? Can we punish them for that?
We can punish Hamas and the people that were responsible for that.
And what about the people who are celebrating in the street and slapping
Not
each other?
good.
What
Not
about the
good.
people who were keeping them in their houses and in prison?
Was that all? Was that all?
I can go for a
Okay,
while
we can
here.
go on. We'll table it. We'll table it. To
We've
the
got a
what do they
minute
call
left.
it? What do they call it in 60 minutes? Like overtime? Okay, two quick things. Business Insider American travelers are experiencing
Oh,
awkward interactions due to President Trump's hostile stance towards traditional allies. Flight bookings from Canada to Europe to the US have declined, and now Americans are scared to go overseas. What say you? I know you're not scared.
of course, I'm not scared to go overseas. Look, Europeans have always hated Americans. This is just They feel good hating Americans. Australians don't like Americans. They like individual Americans, but they don't like Americans as an abstraction. It's the way that lots of people feel about everything. It's what my grandfather used to say was the difference between an anti-Semite and a Jew, right? What's the difference between an anti-Semite and a Jew, Elise? The difference is that
Self-loathing.
The anti-Semite hates the Jews, but he loves his friend David, and he loves his friend Shmuel, and he loves his friend Deborah, right? And the Jew, he loves the Jews, but he hates Deborah and Shmuel and David. This is the difference. People like individual Americans, but they don't like Americans as an abstraction. Anytime a reporter goes and asks people, how do you feel about Americans visiting? People always say, oh, they're so loud and
But
vulgar and
Dany can come to
horrible.
Italy
But
and
I can
spend her
always,
money. Okay,
exactly.
Telegraph has a story about tech bros, real estate boom in DC. Neighbors said experts have labeled the Trump bump. RFK, Mark Zuckerberg, Scott Bessick, and Howard Lutnick obviously have to move there, buying multi-million-dollar properties in Northwest. Sales of luxury homes over 5 million. What say you?
I don't know. You and I both own property in the DMV. You in the district, I in Virginia. I'm not seeing a property boom. Maybe in a zip code that you and I are not allowed into. What do you
It's
think? Are
exclusive.
you
It's
seeing a boom?
no, but I mean, I remember Jeff Bezos bought this like obscenely big house. And I mean, look, there is a talk about, there's this talk about Trump wanting this federal takeover of DC. He's like, I want to make DC beautiful again. My feeling is bring it. If it brings my
Please,
property value, I mean, I don't want it to displace, all residents, but if they could do something to clean up the crime and do some more to clean up the blight in the city, I'd appreciate it. Okay. This was our inaugural. I did fall
I'm
down
almost
on my
done.
cocktail duties, but this was fun. We're gonna do it again. More cocktails, more drinks, more laughs, more cries, and more thoughtful debate of good stories. Thanks for joining us, Dany. Thank you.
Elise, thank you. And thank you to everybody who's on. Let us know what you think. I loved seeing the questions. Sometimes when they come too quickly, it's hard, but we'll start to learn the tech a little better as well. Thank you for joining us. This is this is
It's been fun. Hot takes.
two dear friends who are able to do this is a labor of love.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.